Hey guys, it's Victor from TRADEPRO Academy, and today we're going to talk about the basics of candlestick, wicks, and candlesticks and how they relate to the general story of the market. In front of me, guys, you can see this is the Caterpillar stock screen on a daily chart. We're going to use that for our demonstration today. This is going to be the first basic tutorial video in a little mini series where we're going to look at how candlestick wicks and candlestick bodies affect futures trading, forex trading, and stock trading. Again, what you learn in these little lessons is applicable to all markets as long as you can do technical analysis on them. So let's just go ahead and get started. So like I said, today we're going to be talking about some candlestick wicks. And these next few tips and tricks can be applied to any market, whether it's stock trading, future trading, or forex trading, anything really. So right in front of me on my screen, you can see this is TradingView Caterpillar stock. So first, let's just go over some general info for you guys that you should know. This is not a be-all and end-all. Remember, candlestick wicks might tell you one thing, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen all the time. You're going to have to use other tools along with these candlestick wicks to create a more probable and a higher probability trade idea. So if you memorize all these candlestick patterns or wick patterns, again, doesn't mean that you'll be an instantly profitable trader. You got to look at the whole general story of what the market is telling you. So profitable traders will be able to analyze candlestick wicks as they happen in real time in relation to other qualifiers. So like looking at the trend, maybe the structure and volume, for instance. So that's where futures trading kind of comes into play, and we're going to look at that a little later on. We want to look at the general context of the market and the candlesticks that are forming. If you look at one candle at a time, you probably won't be able to do much with that information, but if you look at candlesticks and their wicks in relation to the market trend and the overall price action, you can find a higher probability for an entry and maybe a capitulation to a trend. So for example, right here on the screen, I'm just zooming into this Caterpillar stock right here. You can see this is a pretty good example right here. These two wicked candles formed, and then we had a large descent to this downside. Right here, you can see these big red candles don't really have much wick to them. This is going to be one of the examples that we're talking about today, where the bears just have total control of this day. These huge red candles with no wicks to them is a general sign of control of the bears. You can see that this happens on the bullish side with the green candles as well. Yeah, that's a general idea that the trend has a lot of likelihood of continuing to the downside. Right here, two more huge red candles print with very little wicks forming on either side of them. Some questions you should ask yourself in regards to candlestick wicks or sticks are the following. So are the candles that are forming larger than the previous candles, and are their wicks larger or smaller? Right here in this huge downtrend, for instance, you can look at these candles right here that are forming and ask yourself, are the next ones smaller or are they bigger than the previous? If they begin to stagnate like this, right here, a little capitulation might be some sign that the trend could be ending, or maybe just a little stall, a little buy stop run before it does continue. Another question could be, where are these smaller or larger wicks or sticks forming in relation to price action? So right here, as another example where this little capitulation begins, you can see that in relation to this general price action, if we disregard these last two candles, it's forming at some general support from previous price action. So this could be a huge fight to either side, see if the bulls have what it takes to bring this back up. But a larger red candle prints here, a little gap forms, and the continuation happens, breaking this structure right here. Now, first, let's look at candle size before we hop into wicks. In a trend, whether up or down, if the candle prints larger and larger, this shows an increase in momentum in that direction, like we did talk about in this general downtrend that has occurred pretty recently. Remember, the longer the candle print, the stronger the candle, red or green. So you can see right here, these huge red candles forming kind of shifts momentum to the bearish side pretty heavily. When the opposite happens, if the candles get smaller and smaller in the direction of the trend, there is likelihood that the trend could be capitulating, or it could just be stalling out before it continues. Remember, take this with a grain of salt because that's what happened right here before it did drop again. Now that we've got those general guidelines out of the way, let's take a look at wicks. So two key factors to consider are the lengths of the wicks that form and the ratio between the wicks formed and the candle bodies. So long wicks are considered to be a big fight between buyers and sellers, and one does prevail ever so slightly. So right here, if we do zoom in, we can see two bigger wicked candles form, one right here and the other one right here. You can see this was the height of the candle and this was the low of it. That's a pretty substantial range, but you can see the body of the candle is pretty small. Again, this doji here forms again, and the sellers in both instances get the upper hand and press the momentum slightly lower. So when a long wick like this prints, like I said, that means price has moved substantially within that day. There has been a fight and a lot of volatility has come out on that larger wick candle. Long wicks are usually seen as support or resistance levels or reversals after a trend fails to break a level. Longer wicks also suggest higher volatility, like I did mention, and another thing to note is the speed at which the wicks are formed. So this is a very important aspect in futures trading. So when analyzing the candlesticks, it's important to note the ratio between wicks and bodies and the size of both. So what I mean by that is that if wicks are overpowering the candlestick body or they're insignificant, what will that mean? Do you see big candles with big wicks or small wicks? Are there small candles with big wicks or small wicks? So what does all that mean? We're going to look at that in just a bit after we kind of highlight some of the main candlesticks and their wicks. So first, let's talk about a long bear candle with little or no wick. Right here is a great example of that. And right here, you can see to the bottom side, there's no wick really. It just, once it opened up here, a temporary press higher and then it just continued lower. Maybe it could have printed a little higher during the day, but it did close at these lows. Again, same thing happened to this big candle right here. This means that generally sellers overpower the buyers quite a bit. The second type of wick and candle we want to look at is a long bull candle with little or no wick. This is where the buyers overpower the sellers significantly. This right here is a pretty good example. These two green candles right here. Very little wick forms to either side. You can see mainly the candle body overpowers this candle. Tiny wick here, maybe a little fight, but generally the buyers have a lot more control. You can see both these candles came out on higher volume as well. Third, I want to look at a little candle body with a long wick in a bullish instance. So this would be an example of that right here. You can see a little doji form, little tiny body, huge wick. Again here, little tiny body, huge wick. This is a pretty big fight between buyers and sellers, and ultimately the buyers do prevail ever so slightly and push price higher. These are very significant candles depending on where you find them in a pattern. We're going to look at that in just a bit. So the fourth one is the same thing, but a red candle on a bearish wave. Right here is a good example right here, right here. General huge fight, but the sellers do prevail in the end. Our next candlestick wick example is a candlestick with a little tiny body and very, very little wick as well. An example is this little tiny candle right here, wedged between these little green candles. This is a very low volatility day, usually accompanied by lower volume. Not really much has happened, but bulls do prevail in this instance. You can find it in a red candle as well, where the bears do slightly prevail, but there is very little wick usually, and this just means there is lower volatility. So the last type of candles I want to talk to you about are long candles with huge wicks. So an example would be this candle right here. You can see this is a huge candle with huge wicks. This is a huge volatility day. Again, this could happen on both a green candle or a red candle. Usually higher volume comes out on this day since there's such big swings in the stock. So using those 6 candlestick wicks and patterns that I mentioned, we could kind of use them in a storytelling sense. We have to look at the general structure and trend of the market first, and then we could conduct some kind of analysis using those wicks. Where do they happen in the trend? How do they form? How quickly do they form? What could they possibly signify? So right here is a good example. You can see the drop occurs right here, and then this cluster starts a huge fight to either side, and finally a bullish wicked doji appears and presses price a little higher. Right here, you can see the wicks to the bottom is a general fight at this low right here, and this candle right here with the huge wick where the bulls just ever so slightly prevail is the deciding factor to push the stock a little higher. So this was a little introduction on candlesticks and candlestick wicks. We talked about the general wicks that you could find accompanied by candlestick bodies, and we've looked at Caterpillar today, a general overview on how to look at candlestick wicks in relation to some trends or the market's general story. Again, guys, this is going to be a little mini series where we're going to look at candlesticks, candlestick wick bodies in relation to futures, forex, and stocks. This was just a little preliminary basic example for you guys. Hope you enjoyed the video and get ready for futures, forex, and again, more in-depth stocks on candlestick wick analysis and how to use them in relation to the overall market's general story using other tools like volume, momentum, and price action. So again, guys, this was Victor from TRADEPRO Academy. I hope you enjoyed this video. Drop a like, a comment, tell us what you want to see next. Are you excited for this new little series? What do you want to see in it? What do you want to get out of it? And ring that little bell to notify you when we do go live every morning on our futures day trading room, Monday through Friday.